In this video, we are going to look at the fundamental rules that apply to wine labelling throughout the world, and in particular, the laws concerning geographical indications, or GIs. Throughout the wine regions of the world, the geographical origin of the grapes that were used to make the wine is a key piece of information on a wine label. Every country has its own particular system for regulating these statements. However, regardless of the individual approach taken, every major wine-making country now uses the same legal framework for their geographical indications. In non-EU countries, GIs are only concerned with defining the limits of the region. Let's take as an example the region of Coonawarra in Australia. If you see Coonawarra on a label, it simply guarantees that 85% of the grapes used to make that wine came from the Coonawarra region. This 85% is the baseline for GIs around the world, although in some countries, stricter local laws apply. A similar 85% rule applies to grape varieties and vintages that appear on a label. In Europe, GIs come with a lot of extra local rules on top of the basic requirements to define the geographical area. These rules can control factors such as the grape varieties used and grape growing and winemaking practices. Second, there are two types of GI: Protected Designation of Origin, or PDO for short, and Protected Geographical Indication, or PGI for short. Finally, although PDO and PGI and their many translations are approved labelling terms, they are rarely used. Instead, most producers use much older traditional labelling terms. Let us take the example of the south of France. Here, as is typical, PDOs are relatively small and have a greater number of restrictions concerning what can or cannot be done. One extra rule that applies to all PDOs throughout the European Union is that 100% of the grapes used must be from the region stated on the label. Minervois is an example of a PDO from this part of France. Producers are limited to grape varieties that are historically associated with the region, in particular, Carignan, Syrah, and Grenache. This label is very typical for a PDO wine. The grape varieties are not listed, although it would be perfectly legal to do so, and the French for PDO is not used. The producers are using the traditional term, Appellation d'origine contrôlée. PGIs are typically larger in area and subject to fewer restrictions. The Pays d'Oc is the most important PGI in this part of France, and it is used by producers who want to use varieties such as Cabernet and Chardonnay that are not traditional to the region. These wines are typically varietally labelled. Here, the traditional labelling term is Vin de Pays. However, Pays d'Oc is of note because it is one of the very few regions where a large number of producers use PGI as a labelling term. In this case, the French translation Indication Géographique Protégée, or IGP. It is also possible for any wine to be sold without a GI. If the producer chooses this option, the wine will simply be labelled with its country of origin. In this video, we have introduced geographical indications and briefly detailed how they are used in EU and non-EU countries. The other videos in this series will cover the GI systems and other labelling terms of the principal wine-making countries in more detail.